Destroy the old you. There is a version of you that needs to die. Not physically. Not dramatically. But completely. The version of you that shrinks in the room. The version that apologizes for existing. The version that has watched opportunity after opportunity pass by, and told itself the lie that timing just wasn't right. That version of you has had enough time. Enough chances. Enough grace. Today, it ends. But here's what nobody tells you about transformation. It doesn't begin with motivation. It doesn't begin with a morning routine or a new gym membership or a vision board on your wall. It begins with a moment of brutal, unblinking honesty, where you look at the person you've been and say, I am no longer willing to be this. The ancient Stoics understood this better than any modern self-help book ever will. They didn't talk about upgrading yourself. They talked about shedding yourself. About burning down the weak, the fearful, the small, so that something harder, something realer, something worth becoming could rise in its place. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, wrote in his private journal, not for public eyes, not for praise, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. He wasn't writing that to the world. He was writing it to himself. Because even emperors have to fight the old version of who they were. And so do you. So stay with me. Because what you're about to hear isn't motivation. Motivation fades by Tuesday. What this is a complete map for destroying the version of you that's been holding you hostage, and building someone the old you wouldn't even recognize. This is going to take everything you have. And it's going to be worth every second. Chapter 1, The Prison You Built Yourself. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. Thomas was 34 years old. By every external measure, his life was fine. Decent job. Small apartment. Weekends that blurred into each other. He had dreams once, real ones. He was going to start a business. Travel. Build something that mattered. But somewhere between 22 and 34, something happened. Not one catastrophic event. Nothing dramatic. Just a slow, quiet surrender. One snooze button at a time. One skipped opportunity at a time. One I'll start Monday at a time. Thomas wasn't suffering. That was the problem. He was comfortable. And comfort, disguised as peace, had become his prison. One day his younger brother, 5 years younger, launched a business. It wasn't perfect. It struggled. But it existed. And something cracked open inside Thomas watching it. Not jealousy. Something deeper. Recognition. The realization that the gap between him and his dreams wasn't talent. Wasn't luck. Wasn't timing. It was the old him. The comfortable him. The him that had been running the show unchallenged for over a decade. That night Thomas sat alone and asked himself a question he had been avoiding for years. If nothing changes, what does my life look like in 10 years? The answer terrified him. And that terror was the first honest thing he had felt in years. Here is what the Stoics knew that most people refuse to accept: you are not a fixed thing. You are not your history. You are not your patterns. You are not the sum of your past decisions, permanently locked in place. Epictetus, born a slave, became one of the greatest philosophers in history, said this: man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. Read that again. The prison most people live in isn't built from circumstance. It's built from perception. From the story you keep telling yourself about why change isn't possible. About why now isn't the right time. About why other people can do it but you, somehow, are the exception to every rule of human potential. The old you is a storyteller. And it is very, very good at its job. It tells you that you're being realistic when you're actually just being afraid. It tells you that you're protecting yourself when you're actually just avoiding growth. It tells you that the life you have is enough, right up until the moment you're old enough to see clearly what you traded for that false comfort. The first step to destroying the old you isn't action. It's awareness. You cannot dismantle a prison you refuse to acknowledge you're living in. So right now, before we go any further, I want you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to name it. The thing you keep not doing. The version of yourself you keep promising to become. The decision you keep delaying. The old pattern you know, is costing you. Name it. Hold it. Don't run from it. Because the moment you stop running is the moment the real work can begin. Chapter 2, The Stoic Surgery. Imagine a surgeon preparing for an operation. They don't walk into the operating room emotional. They don't allow sentiment to guide the scalpel. They don't hesitate because cutting feels unkind. They cut precisely, deliberately, completely, because they understand that the only way to save the patient is to remove what is diseased without apology and without hesitation. Destroying the old you requires the same surgical precision. This is what the Stoics called prohairesis, the disciplined, deliberate choice of what you give your will to. Your complete inner freedom to decide not just what you do, but who you are deciding to become. Moment by moment. Choice by choice. Most people treat identity like weather. Something that happens to them. Something they observe. Something they complain about but feel powerless to change. The Stoics treated identity like architecture. Something you design. Something you build with intention and rebuild when the old structure no longer serves you. So what does the Stoic surgery actually look like? What are the specific things the old you has that need to come out? The first thing to cut is the need for approval. There was a philosopher named Cato. In ancient Rome, social status was everything. What people thought of you determined your entire world. Cato would walk through the streets of Rome barefoot. In the heat. In the cold. Not because he couldn't afford sandals. But as a daily practice in indifference to what others thought. He was training himself, surgically, deliberately, to sever the cord between his self-worth and the opinions of others. The old you is addicted to being liked. It softens your truth so people stay comfortable. It shrinks your ambition so people don't feel threatened. It abandons your standards so people don't call you difficult. Every time you edit yourself for an audience, you are feeding the old you. You are handing your power to people who, in most cases, are too busy managing their own insecurities to deserve that power. Cut it. Not rudely. Not arrogantly. But completely. The second thing to cut is the fantasy of perfect conditions. Let me tell you about Seneca. One of Rome's greatest Stoic philosophers, advisor to emperors, one of the wealthiest men of his time. He wrote letters, extraordinary letters about the nature of time, discipline, and the urgency of becoming. And in one of those letters he wrote something that should shake you to your core: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The old you is waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right resources. The right level of readiness. The right sign. But here's the brutal truth that Seneca understood 2,000 years ago: the perfect moment is a myth designed by fear to keep you exactly where you are. Every day you wait for perfect conditions is a day you practice waiting. And the more you practice waiting, the better you get at it. The new you doesn't wait. The new you starts inside the mess, inside the uncertainty, inside the imperfect, and builds the conditions through action, not before it. The third thing to cut is shallow living. The Stoics had a concept called memento mori. Remember that you will die. Roman generals returning from victory would have a slave ride beside them in their chariot, not to celebrate, but to whisper in their ear, "Remember, you are mortal." In the height of glory. At the peak of triumph. A reminder that time is finite and not a single second of it should be wasted on smallness. The old you lived shallow. Scrolling. Consuming. Reacting. Filling time instead of investing it. Choosing entertainment over evolution. The old you will reach the end of its life with a full hard drive of content watched and an empty record of life actually lived. The surgery here is ruthless. It means asking, every single day, is what I am doing right now building the person I am trying to become, or is it feeding the person I am trying to destroy? Those are the only two options. There is no neutral ground. Chapter 3, The Identity Shift. Here is the part that most transformation content skips entirely. And it is the most important part. You cannot destroy the old you and leave a vacuum. Nature, and human psychology, abhors emptiness. If you remove who you were without installing who you are becoming, the old version will come back. Every time. More stubborn. More entrenched. More convincing. This is why people quit. This is why the same resolutions get made January after January. This is why cycles repeat for years. Because destruction without construction is just chaos. So who is the new you? The Stoics didn't speak in vague terms here. They were architects. They built specific blueprints for the person they were committed to becoming. Marcus Aurelius didn't just say I want to be better. He wrote, in precise detail, the qualities he was building. Patience. Justice. Discipline. Rationality. Service. Every single day he held those qualities up against his actions like a measuring stick. You need a blueprint. Not a vision board. Not a mood board. Not an aesthetic. A character blueprint. A specific, honest, detailed description of who the new you actually is. How they think. How they respond under pressure. How they treat their time. What they refuse to tolerate, from the world and from themselves. Let me walk you through building it. The new you has a different relationship with discomfort. The old you avoided pain. The new you understands that discomfort is directional, it always points toward growth. Cold water. Hard conversations. Early mornings. Difficult work. Every time the new you chooses the uncomfortable path, it is making a deposit into the account of who it is becoming. The interest on those deposits is compounded character. There's a practice the Stoics called voluntary hardship. Deliberately choosing difficulty not because you have to, but to prove to yourself that you can. Seneca would periodically eat the simplest food, wear the roughest clothes, sleep without luxury, not out of punishment, but out of training. He wanted to know, deep in his bones, that he could survive without the comforts he'd built. That his peace didn't depend on his possessions. What is your voluntary hardship? Where are you deliberately choosing hard to build the muscle of resilience? The new you has a non-negotiable relationship with integrity. Not moral performance for an audience. Private integrity. The promises you make to yourself when no one is watching. The alarm you set and actually get up for. The work you do when there's no applause coming. The standard you hold when compromise would be easier. Every broken promise to yourself teaches your subconscious that you cannot be trusted. And a man who doesn't trust himself cannot build anything that lasts. Every kept promise, no matter how small, is a brick. And eventually, enough bricks become a fortress. The new you thinks in decades, not days. One of the most destructive features of the old you is its time horizon. It thinks about today's comfort, today's validation, today's feelings. The new you zooms out. It asks, what does this choice look like in 5 years? In 10? It plants trees it may not sit under. It builds habits whose payoff is years away. It sacrifices the immediate for the essential. This is not easy. The human brain is wired for the immediate. But the Stoics understood that wisdom is the practice of overriding the immediate in service of the meaningful. And that practice, like every practice, gets easier with repetition. Chapter 4, The Daily Demolition. Transformation is not an event. Let me say that again because it is the most important sentence in this entire script. Transformation is not an event. It is a daily practice of choosing differently. The old you will not die in a single dramatic moment. It will not disappear after one powerful video, one great week, one breakthrough conversation. It dies the way it was built, slowly, quietly, one choice at a time. This is actually good news. Because it means you don't need a perfect day. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to make one better choice than the old you would have made. Then another. Then another. The Stoics had a practice called amor fati, love of fate. Not passive acceptance of whatever happens, but an active embrace of reality as the raw material of growth. Whatever today brings, obstacle, failure, setback, boredom, pain, the Stoic doesn't ask why is this happening to me. They ask how do I use this? Let me tell you about James. James had been trying to lose weight for 6 years. Not morbidly, just that 30 pounds that had settled in slowly and refused to leave. He tried every program, every diet, every Monday fresh start. And every time, within 3 weeks, the old James would return. The James who ate late. Who skipped workouts. Who negotiated with himself until the negotiation always ended in the same place, surrender. One day James stopped trying to overhaul everything. He stopped looking for the perfect program. He made one decision: every single morning, before he did anything else, he would take a 20-minute walk. That was it. One commitment. One daily act that the new James did and the old James didn't. 12 months later James had lost the weight. But more importantly, he had built something far more valuable than a physical transformation. He had built a track record of keeping his word to himself. And that track record became the foundation for every other change that followed. This is the daily demolition. Not grand gestures. Not radical overhauls. Small, consistent, daily choices that the old you would not make, and the new you refuses not to. Here is what that looks like in practice. Every morning, before the phone, before the noise, before the world gets its hands on your attention, you spend 5 minutes in silence asking one question: what would the strongest version of me do today? Not the comfortable version. The strongest version. Every evening, before sleep takes you, you spend 5 minutes in honest review. Not self-punishment. Honest accounting. Where did the old you show up today? Where did the new you hold the line? What needs to be different tomorrow? This is what Marcus Aurelius did. Every morning, every evening, in his private journal, he examined himself. Not to perform for history. He didn't know anyone would ever read those words. He did it because he understood that the unexamined life drifts. And drifting is how the old you stays in charge. During the day, every time you face a moment of choice between comfort and growth, between the old response and the new one, pause. One breath. One question. Who am I choosing to be right now? Not perfect execution. Not zero failure. Just conscious choosing. The moment you make the choice consciously, even if you choose wrong, you have broken the autopilot of the old you. And breaking autopilot is how new patterns are born. Chapter 5, The Enemies of Transformation. You need to know what you're up against. Because the old you will not go quietly. It has allies. Powerful ones. And if you don't recognize them, they will undo everything you're building. Enemy 1, the comfort conspiracy. The world is specifically, deliberately, expensively engineered to keep you comfortable and consuming. Every app. Every algorithm. Every streaming service. Every fast food chain. Every convenience designed to make sure you never have to sit with discomfort long enough to do something about it. The Stoics lived in a world without smartphones. Without Netflix. Without instant delivery. Without 1,000 frictionless ways to escape the present moment. They had to sit with themselves. They had to face their thoughts. They had to experience boredom, and rather than medicate it, they used it as fuel for philosophy, for reflection, for growth. Your comfort is being sold back to you as a product. And every time you buy it, the old you gets stronger and the new you gets weaker. The antidote is deliberate friction. Make comfort slightly harder to access. Make growth slightly easier. Put the book on your pillow. Put the phone in another room at night. Make the default hard option slightly more accessible than the default easy one. You are not fighting willpower, you are redesigning your environment so the new you wins by default. Enemy 2, the wrong circle. There is a Stoic principle that is almost never talked about in modern self-help circles, perhaps because it is uncomfortable. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not metaphorically. Neurologically. Your brain literally calibrates what is normal, what is possible, and what is acceptable based on the people around you. The old you is often being sustained by the wrong circle. People who are comfortable with their own stagnation and unconsciously need yours. People who call your ambition arrogance. People who celebrate your failures and get quietly uncomfortable at your wins. People who have made peace with average and mistake your restlessness for ingratitude. This doesn't mean you cut everyone cruelly. But it does mean you are intentional about who gets access to your time and energy. It means you actively seek people who are building what you want to build. Who hold standards you want to hold. Who make your current best feel insufficient, not through criticism, but through example. The new you needs a new circle. Or at minimum, a different inner circle. Enemy 3, the highlight reel trap. Never in human history has it been easier to feel like a failure by comparison. Every phone scroll is a curated exhibition of other people's best moments, their wins, their bodies, their relationships, their travel, their success. And the old you, already insecure, already doubting, absorbs it as evidence that everyone else has figured it out and you alone are falling behind. The Stoics had a word, fantasia, for the false impressions the mind creates from incomplete information. You are watching highlights and writing a narrative of your own inadequacy from them. You are comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's showreel. And that comparison is stealing your energy, your focus, and your peace. The new you competes with exactly one person. Yesterday's version of yourself. That's the only race that matters. That's the only leaderboard that reflects reality. Enemy 4, the identity story. This is the most insidious enemy of all. The story you have been telling about who you are for so long that it has become invisible. I'm not a disciplined person. I've always been this way. That's just how I'm wired. People like me don't do things like that. These are not facts. They are conclusions drawn from past behavior that happened when the old you was in charge. They have no power over the new you unless you keep reciting them. The Stoics understood that identity is a practice, not a personality. You are not fixed. You are not finished. You are not the same person who made the choices that led you here. The moment you decide to be different, genuinely decide, not wish, the story changes. Stop narrating the old story. Start living the new one. Chapter 6, The Rebirth. There is a moment, and you will know it when it comes, where something shifts. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, in an ordinary moment, when you catch yourself responding to a situation the old you never would have handled well, and you handle it well. Without thinking. Without forcing it. It just happens. And in that moment you realize, the new you is no longer an aspiration. It's becoming your default. This is the rebirth the Stoics pointed toward. Not a single dramatic transformation. A gradual, earned, undeniable shift in who you actually are at the level of instinct and habit and automatic response. Let me tell you about Marcus Aurelius one more time. Because his story is the most powerful example of this rebirth in all of recorded history. He did not choose to become emperor. The responsibility was handed to him, and it was enormous. He ruled an empire of 70 million people during wars, plagues, economic crises, and political betrayal. He faced more pressure in a single week than most people face in a lifetime. And by every historical account, he handled it. Not perfectly. He would be the first to admit that. But with a consistency of character that made him one of the greatest leaders who ever lived. How? Because for years, before the throne, before the power, before the pressure, he had been doing the daily work. The morning reflections. The evening reviews. The voluntary hardship. The study of philosophy. The practice of responding rather than reacting. The constant, relentless, private work of destroying who he had been in order to become who he needed to be. When the moment of ultimate pressure came, he was ready. Not because he was naturally extraordinary, but because he had made himself so, one day at a time, for years before anyone was watching. That is what the rebirth looks like. Not a moment of inspiration. Years of preparation. And then, when life demands the best of you shows up. Because you built it. Because you earned it. Because you did the work when no one was watching and no one was clapping. The question is not whether you are capable of this. You are. Every human being who has ever committed to this process has found what they were looking for on the other side of it. The question is whether you are willing. Whether you are done with the comfort of the old you. Whether the cost of staying the same has finally become greater than the cost of changing. Because here is the final Stoic truth I want to leave with you, and it is perhaps the hardest and most liberating thing you will hear today. No one is coming. No one is going to save you from the old you. No mentor, no partner, no circumstance, no piece of content, including this one, is going to do the work for you. The transformation is entirely, completely, and exclusively yours to make. And that is not a burden. That is freedom. Because it means the only person who has ever been standing between you and who you could be, is you. And you can move. So here is where we stand. You came into this with a version of yourself you've been carrying, maybe for years. A version that's been comfortable when it should have been courageous. Quiet when it should have been decisive. Waiting when it should have been building. That version has served its purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. It kept you safe when safety mattered. But you are past that now. And you know it. That's why you're here. That's why you watched this far. The old you doesn't survive the next chapter of your life. Not because it's weak, but because you are outgrowing it. The person you are becoming has no room for the patterns you are leaving behind. So what do you do now? You go back to the daily demolition. One morning reflection. One evening review. One choice, today, that the new you makes and the old you wouldn't. You find your voluntary hardship. You audit your circle. You write your character blueprint. And you start. Not Monday. Not next month. Not when the conditions improve. Now. Because Seneca was right, you have been suffering more in imagination than in reality. The doing is never as hard as the dreading. The building is never as painful as the staying stuck. The first step is never as heavy as the weight of the unlived life you're carrying when you don't take it. Destroy the old you. Not with anger. Not with self-hatred. With clarity. With intention. With the calm, certain knowledge that something far better is waiting on the other side of who you've been. Marcus Aurelius asked himself every morning, what needs to be done by a person of reason and social conscience? I'm asking you a simpler version of that same question right now. What needs to be done, by the person you are choosing to become, starting today? You already know the answer. You've known it for a while. The only thing left is to begin. If this reached something in you, if something in here hit differently today, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to Stoic Saga. This channel exists for one reason, to give you the thinking tools, the mindset frameworks, and the raw honest truth that builds the kind of person the world needs more of. New content every week. Hit the bell so you never miss it. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone you care about is hand them the exact words they needed at the exact moment they needed them. The old you watched this and did nothing. The new you subscribes, shares, and starts. Which one are you? Nothing. The new you subscribes, shares, and starts. Which one are you?